Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Zero Generation podcast. As always, it's the podcast for the dreamers who left home and are making a new home abroad. Today, I'm super excited to be talking to someone who has broken ground. So it's very rare that you hear an African, a Nigerian, a Yoruba name when it comes to elected office in the U.S. And this is someone who is blazing a trail after doing a lot of stuff in corporate as well as in community organizing. I'll let him introduce himself. Thank you so much for being here, Representative Segun Adeyina.
Thank you.
Yeah, so please tell us who you are and what you do.
I knew you were going to ask me that question.
You did?
I'm State Representative Segun Adeyina, House District 110, which is in Gwinnett County, covers the cities of Grayson, Loganville, Littleville, Lawrenceville, and Snellville. And I'm honored to be one of the first Nigerian-American elected officials in the state of Georgia in 2022. And I must put a twist to that. I'm also Caribbean. My mom is from St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
That's amazing.
So, I'm all diaspora, all African diaspora.
That's amazing. So you're carrying so many flags. How many passports do you have at this point?
I only have one.
Okay.
I only have one.
Okay. You know, Nigerians or Africans, we collect passports quite a bit. We like to collect passports.
Yes.
So I was, when I was reading and just doing research, I had one question that I feel like you'll be able to answer best. What does a state representative do, and how does it differ from the representatives who are like in the Capitol in DC?
Oh, completely. Your state representatives are officials elected to pass and propose laws that impact you on the state level. Most of the laws that we deal with today are state, that you deal on a day-to-day basis, are state and city ordinances,
Right.
or laws. And on the federal level, of course, on the higher level, you do have representation in D.C. that talk about things are on the federal level when it comes to anything related to military, immigration, education, just on a higher level, just more of a guide. But the states still impact you on your day-to-day laws and activities.
Right. And that makes sense because, the U.S. is very, I don't know if it's federal or the opposite, where states have a lot of autonomy and power.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
you're important to the day-to-day lives of the folks who are in your constituency. I almost want to sing this, but how did you get here?
Oh, wow.
Nobody's supposed to be here.
I tell everybody, everyone has a path in life, and you have a commitment. And my journey started many years ago, immigrating from Nigeria, coming to school in the U.S. at a young age of 17 plus. I came here as a student, and with the challenges in Nigeria, continued to be here, and eventually started my career here, and along that family. And in that whole process, you understand the things that are important to you in life, and you realize that you participate. And I've always participated, right from when I was young in Nigeria. Always been in some kind of organization, student-led, always rose to the occasion to lead, just because that was my nature. That was the way I was raised.
Do you remember your earliest, you talk about how you left when you were 17, so maybe it sounds like you did some secondary school in Nigeria before you. So what kind of, leadership positions, what kind of communities were you part of where you found yourself at that age, wanting to participate?
Post coming to America?
Well, before and right before and come, or whatever is even most meaningful to you, right? If there's nothing interesting, then
there's so many opportunities,
Yeah.
right? So I went to school at Federal Government College, Ilorin, in Kwara State.
Right.
That's where I went for my secondary education. And while I was in school, and if I recollect, I was a room prefect. I know those who are in Nigeria can relate.
Yeah.
Boarding school.
Yeah.
And your responsibility at that time was to just make sure people were held accountable, to the rules and the schedules and things like that. But I've always found myself in spaces with friends where if things were going on, I was always the person that would organize or lead
Right.
or initiate.
Right.
So I've always had that as a young man prior to coming to America. So it was appropriate coming to school here. I always stepped into a lot of roles, especially when it addressed issues of cultural issues.
Yeah.
Where as an African, what we represent, some of the stereotypes that you hear, and those challenged me. So I found myself early in college. I was not only the president of the International Students Club, I was also the president of the African Students Union.
Wow.
I was also involved in the Black United Students organizations, because when you heard stereotypes and people not speaking, I found myself in a lot of positions where I stood up.
Right. You felt like if nobody's speaking, I have to. You felt that like I need to speak up.
Yes.
Was there any like life situation that triggered that in you, or was it just innate? Like you just found yourself wanting to rise to the occasion?
I think it was the nature of how I was brought up. My parents, my dad has always been very active. Even he's an orthopedic surgeon, but looking at his journey, he was always that person that would speak up and that person that would initiate things. And I think I get a lot of that from him. Both my parents, my mother, she has always had the opportunity to, even though she worked in the airline industry most of her career, she's always had to lead. She worked for KLM Royal Dutch Airlines in Nigeria. And, she was one of the few first Black leaders in the Nigerian space.
Right.
And to that effect, because she spoke multiple languages.
Right.
She spoke Dutch.
Right.
So that enabled her to not only her work ethic, but also having that diversity.
Yeah. And speaking to work ethic, there is, I can speak for, Nigerians, because you didn't come to America to play around. You came to, so how did that work ethic, how was it instilled in you, and how did it show up like once you crossed over here?
Yeah. Discipline, being in the boarding system in Nigeria, you had a regimen and a program that you had to follow when you woke up, when it was time to eat, when you went to sleep, how you studied. All those things were imbibed in me early. So even though the cultural differences were a challenge here initially, but you made that adjustment. But you always had that focus on what you had to achieve.
Yeah. Yes. The goal.
Yeah. And you were accountable. You were held accountable.
Yeah.
Not just by your parents, but by your village.
The community.
Right?
Yes.
By the community as a whole.
Yes. I love that. Like going, switching over to community, you did quite, and I also want to talk about your corporate life, because, I know that you also did quite a lot there. How did you get into community organizing? So it sounds like you were, raised really in community, and it's the same, with me in Nigeria. Your teachers will report you to your parents. Some teachers will even take permission to do that. I know your dad, I will discipline you and nothing will happen, those kind of things. So, adults took it, of course some people abused it, but for the most part, adults took it upon themselves to like raise and train children within that community. And then I think a lot of people, when they move here, that community sort of is yanked away. And, so I'm curious about how you found yourself in community again and even began to like organize on behalf of other people like you. Like, what was your sort of frame of mind or reasoning during that time?
Well, with cultural differences, the strongest point is education. Mm-hmm. And you don't always have a formal platform to learn that. And there are a lot of stereotypes in every society based on your background, your religion, your race, whatever it is. But I always took the initiative because I knew if I didn't teach or share, then you can't dispel some of those myths and stereotypes. So when I found myself in spaces where people didn't understand something, so for instance, during the time I was in school, apartheid was still huge in South Africa. And I remember there was a student body of ANC that traveled to 16 cities, and they picked University of Akron.
Which is where you went?
Which is where I went for my bachelor's.
Yeah.
And Akron is a smaller city. Of course, it's home of LeBron James.
Yeah.
But at the time, we didn't have a LeBron James, and the world didn't know much about Akron at the time. Well, maybe because it was rubber capital of the world because of the tire industry.
Right.
But other than that, they picked Akron, and I was president of the African Students Union at the time, and I think it was very important for the community to understand the challenges of apartheid in South Africa, which was very similar to the civil rights movement here in the U.S. and understanding the journey of being black in America and contrasting that being black in South Africa. Even though Nigeria, our challenge was a little different, where we didn't have apartheid per se, but we did have we were colonized by the British.
So like ethnic division. Yeah.
So it was always important to be that voice where there were challenges and cultural differences and misunderstanding.
Right. So ANC came, and what role did you get to meet the ANC leaders?
Oh yeah, were
you inspired by them?
No, I was extremely involved because that was the role that we played. We were the host organization in the school, the student body that represented the interest. The challenge back then was everyone thinks Africa is one big country.
Yes. Till today.
I've never been to South Africa, and I know I will in the future. But when people talked about Africa, they felt you had that same experience, but I didn't.
Yeah.
But I could understand the need because I did go to school with folks who were in Southern Africa, whether it was Namibia or Zimbabwe, where they were also fighting that oppression and challenge of apartheid.
Yeah.
And they came to Nigeria to school.
Right.
So I did have engagement during that time. Yeah.
I see.
It was easier to relate and understand that they also needed voices here. So during their tour, my organization was very pivotal and instrumental in the conversations within the community in Akron, Ohio.
That's awesome. Like, as you're talking, I'm thinking you had a really unique experience because you went to secondary school in Nigeria, but then you got to meet these Africans, at that age. So I went to A-levels in South Africa, and I did get like Uganda and Zambia, and so I got that immersion, and I'm forever grateful for that experience. Before I then went back to Nigeria for uni, but it's really unique, and I wonder how, if you've even maybe reflected on how that, almost like cosmopolitanism or Afropolitanism influenced your worldview and kind of also brought you to where you are today, which is one of the only people of your background in elected office in the U.S.
Yeah, and it's good you said that because you appreciate your background more.
Yes.
Right. Even though my whole adult life I've lived in the U.S., but the foundation, a big part of the foundation was in Nigeria. Actually, my early childhood, because my parents were diasporans also.
Right.
My dad studied in Russia.
Right.
My mom was from, she was in Netherlands. My dad was in the UK doing his housemanship when he met my mother. But they moved back to Nigeria, had me and my sister moved back to the UK. Went to the UK for some years, and I think that was till about 7, 8, moved back to Nigeria.
Right.
So, full circle, kind of doing what they did. I didn't do the full circle of moving back.
Yeah.
But it makes you appreciate the diversity in the different groups and ethnicities that you meet.
Yeah, I think they call that like a third culture kid now, or at least when I was in secondary school. Like I know people who the people I know whose like parents were diplomats, and so they got to live, were born in Togo, lived in Sierra Leone, or went to France and did all that stuff. And so for me, it's even almost making sense that you are where you are because you naturally were inclined to just understand a broad range of perspectives. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about So you graduated at University of Akron, and then what did you do next? Yeah,
I got a job at in Detroit, Michigan, consulting for Capgemini America. And my background at the time was I had a bachelor's in electrical engineering, and I'd always been in the IT field, so I had quite a bit of initial experience in the IT field. So I went into consulting. And everyone who knows Detroit is Motor City, Motor Capital.
Yeah.
And even though I initially didn't start working directly in the automotive industry, I was consulting in that space, and also did quite a bit in healthcare IT.
Right.
Owned my own business, was also consulting, and also went further to also actually teach part-time. So,
I saw that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I taught both at University of Phoenix and Wayne County Community College, which was a good experience because I took what I learned in the classroom. Actually, what I learned in the corporate world, I brought into the classroom. And then I had the practical experience also running my business, consulting in the same field, and be able to pull on resources in where I had students that learned in the classroom, and I actually hired a few of them in my consulting business as I
were you teaching engineering or business?
No, primarily IT courses.
IT courses. Really cool. Yeah. What drove your desire to teach?
Initially, and I think I started at University of Phoenix, and like most Africans, I would say it was a hustle. It was a hustle because you're here and you want the opportunity to, and not that I had a desire to always do something like that, but it was also a hustle. That's the honest truth. But then what I enjoyed about teaching was you increased your knowledge because you were challenged, right? When you're in an education environment, people challenge you and they push you to those limits, and then bring that practical experience where theoretically is not always what happens in the real world. And when you're in that situation, you're able to bring that practical experience and compare to what the theory and how it's been applied.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm someone who is interested in so many things, and now you just gave me another, like, maybe I should go explore teaching.
It's rewarding. It's very rewarding.
Is it? That's awesome. How did you then now end up, how did you move from that into elected office? I'm sure it's probably a multi-year journey. But what was that trend? What was, what happened, and what were the highlights of that journey?
So I was very active in the Nigerian community when I was in Michigan. I actually had two platforms. One was the Nigerian Reunion. The Nigerian Reunion was created, back in 97, 99. And it was about bringing a lot of us that had immigrated here. Some of us didn't have families here. Every July 4th would gather together. It actually started in Atlanta in 97. There were a group of young ladies who said, hey, let's do a Queen's College reunion. And then it became the King's College. Let's include the boys. And then before we knew it was all federal government colleges and university schools. And I think it kicked off that year with about 600 people. And I had a friend that was involved, so I came down and had a good time in Atlanta. I went back to Michigan. The next year, the group reached out to me because I think I helped solve a situation, and they asked me to participate. And we took it to D.C. And then the year after that, some folks said, hey, you have such a calm charisma and you understand how to put this together. Can you lead? And in 99, we had it in Detroit. And lo and behold, it pulled a lot of people who immigrated here. And we also had first, second, third, fourth generation that were born here, never been to Nigeria, but could connect with people that had similar names. And what was really exciting about it, not only were we pulling people together, we also used the platform from an entertainment perspective. We also used it from a business perspective. We've had everywhere from Michael Blackson to Daddy Shoki to Onyeka Onwenu, Style
Those
Plus.
Those were all the stars in that era.
Style Plus, Lagbaja's 50-man band. We did that in New Jersey.
Amazing.
Fell on Broadway when the Fell on Broadway launched.
Right.
We had the cast in Miami.
This is Nigeria. So we're looking at Nigerian-American history right here. That's amazing.
It was just such a really natural platform. We had the Nigerian Stock Exchange in Atlanta in 2000. We had a Basket Mouse start his career out here. We had D'banj, Daily Momodu. Ovation magazine was a big instrumentalist in exposing the platform globally.
Yeah.
So we had working with Abike Dabiri. You know, she engaged us. The Speaker of the House, Dimeji Bankole, came to one of our town hall meetings in Las Vegas. You know, we've had movie stars. You know, so it's really been, and then that's where I kind of started.
Yeah,
like engaging on that platform, and it further got me involved in the Nigerians in Diaspora organization, which I was on the board for 4 years. Where it's the goal of that platform is to leverage professional resources to give back in Nigeria, and that experience was challenging, not only because it required resources, but it was also a power struggle. You know, people utilize that platform for different reasons,
right?
But for me, the focus was always how do we empower ourselves. Very similar to what the Indian immigrant community, the Chinese immigrant communities, to really align the public-private partnerships between the community here in the diaspora, the government back home, and the private industry. And where there have been some successes, I think we could have done a lot more.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Of like, how successful, especially like thinking back to the Nigerian government and, you know, trying to do something meaningful, you know, how successful, you know, has that been? I don't think it has been, because I know look at the situation of Nigeria now, but
you know, it's really hard to define that success.
Yeah.
Because the truth of the matter is the diaspora cannot do it alone.
Correct.
You have to have willing participants on ground.
Correct.
And I think sometimes we're all misinformed. There are challenges in both places. And I think the biggest challenge is government, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Painting that roadmap. I really appreciate anyone in elected office, and because stepping up requires a certain gumption for you to be there, and encouraged or criticized.
Yeah.
Right. So no matter, but then again, doing the things that's for the greater interests of your community is important.
Yeah.
So I was also involved in one platform that it's also important. I'm a Christian. I was involved with the Redeemed Christian Church of God.
Right, which is
North America.
A nation of its own.
Yes, it is. And I was on the African Missions Board. And the African Missions Board, and the reason why they reached out to me was because of my engagement with young Nigerians on the Nigerian Union platform. And bringing that experience there was also important to see the kind of work, the charitable work and the impact we're making in Africa as a whole.
Yeah.
So that was also another opportunity that I participated. So my journey primarily was in the diaspora space.
Yeah. I have two questions.
Yeah.
I'm curious about how instrumental Redeemed Christian Church of God is politically in the because you know they're a bloc in Nigeria. They're a political bloc on their own in Nigeria. So I'm curious about that. And I guess my second question is, you know, what do you say to people who like relocate and they're like, I really just want to be on my own. I don't want to, you know, hang out with Nigerians. I can't trust. I don't know who to trust. You know, I don't know where, you know, because what you did was the complete opposite of that, which is let's all get together and like power in numbers and empower each other and even empower those back home. So I guess those are my two questions, and you can take whichever one first.
So I think the church community for me was really important in my upbringing in America, because of the values that I believed in. It really guided me on how I did things. So with everything I did, I also made sure there was a platform for us to fellowship and share information. And also, it was also a space that our community could really come together and connect with each other and talk about the issues we had in the community. Interesting enough, and I remember when I was in Detroit, I represented the church on a faith-based community committee for the city of Detroit, the mayor's office. And my pastor couldn't always be there, so I represented in that capacity. But they knew that the African community was there because of our presence.
Yeah.
So it was always important that the church was present. And I think what's happening now, one of the things is the Redeemed Christian Church has a camp, just like in Nigeria, in Dallas. and it's short of a few hectares of being a city.
Amazing.
And every year, and I haven't been in a number of years, but every year when people go down for the annual convention, and Daddy Gio comes in, it's a large turnout.
Yeah.
I think a year and a half ago when I was elected, I had the honor, because he also does events around the country, and we did one here called Light Up Atlanta. They do it every year here, and he came for Light Up Atlanta. And last year I had the honor to recognize his presence here and appreciate him for the impact he's making, not just globally, but here in Atlanta, by having this event, bringing people together, bringing our community together as we worship, but just recognizing the awesome impact and the contributions that we're making.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So the other question is, what do you say to, and I ask because there's a wave of immigration happening again, much like what happened in the early 90s, I want to say. What do you say to someone who's like in between, right? Or maybe doesn't even know how to approach community building?
Yeah.
How, you land in a city, maybe something's not really, you're new, you don't know, like what advice would you give them on leveraging that power of community and, people that have the same shared experience as them?
Well, so I tell people you have to be part of an organization in your community for two reasons. One is when you reside in the country and you bring your family or you start a family, you want your kids to have some point of reference of where you're from.
Yeah.
And you can't do that alone.
Yeah.
You have to do that with the community that you grew up in, and to be able to pass on that legacy and understanding for them.
Yeah.
So they can do the same. The other part too, we're still learning and we're still trying to mature. When I look at some other communities, they're able to break the communities they live in, where they're able to transcend their culture across the board to other communities, but also try to provide the right services within our community, whether it's access to healthcare, education, the resources that you live in. Because when you come somewhere, you don't know, how you have to learn how to open a bank account. You have to learn how to find a place to live. You have to, all those things are not a very huge task for someone coming new to a space. But if you have a platform and organization that provides those services, it adds value to what you're doing.
Yeah.
And a lot of our organizations are not totally there yet. We still have, a lot of us think of back home, but we have another community that we have an obligation to here in the U.S. And that is one of the primary reasons why I ran, because I understood that communities like ours that are Black diasporans, and I know I talk a lot about the Nigerian side, but it also applies to my Caribbean side. It also applies to anyone that immigrates to this country. What challenges do they have integrating into this society? Yeah.
Talking about why you ran and when you ran, and now that you did win the seat and you're doing the work, how is it different from when you were doing more of community organizing?
It's different because you have a voice that people listen to, because you represent a constituency that has needs and demands, and you have to speak up for those needs and demands. Yeah. Today I was at a press conference that related to the superintendent of Georgia, superintendent for education of Georgia, who on Monday canceled the AP African American Studies course for high school kids throughout the state. And Black history is a big part of American history. Yeah. I don't care where you're from around the world. Is a really intricate part of American history. Yeah. The reason why a lot of us are able to take advantage of the opportunities that we have today. Yeah. So when that happened, and being that I also sit on the education committee in the House, it was really vital that I had to participate in that press conference, not only recognizing the impact it would have to our kids, present, but on the future of this country.
Even more, yeah.
So it's not just a one-off course. It is something that's very vital to the growth of our community,
Yeah.
helping our kids reflect on why they are where they are,
Yeah.
and what they have to do to continue to do that. And as a reminder, that was a very dark, when we look at Black history, and yeah, there's some positives in today where we're breaking glass ceilings, such as Vice President Kamala Harris running for president,
Yeah.
who I know will be the first Black female president.
Man.
But we have to look at that history that shapes all of us.
Yes.
Right. And that's what it is.
So in addition to some of these, like this issue that you just talked about, like, the education, and removing AP, African American history, what are some of the other issues that as people, like as African immigrants or people from the diaspora, that we should be keeping an eye on and that we should care about because it, impacts us and our communities?
Well, I mean, the cost of living is a challenge for all of us. We're going through some economic challenges today, and who we elect is important in being able to make the decisions that would help improve that.
Yeah.
And I think some of the things that President Biden has done, such as the infrastructure project, is creating opportunities, a lot of opportunities for small businesses.
Yeah.
So as immigrants come here, I think we have to look at two paths, not just if, some people want to work in the corporate world, but I think what makes America great is the opportunity to create your own business.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of what the current administration has done and will continue to do is create small business opportunities for us to live. And we have to take advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah, this is a very great perspective because in a recent episode we talked about corporate America and some of the highs and lows, and also like how people think of entrepreneurship as an option, but also like not quite from the perspective that you brought, where it's being a small business that's like providing a very direct service, could be to government or to like the community. I think people think more of like the glamour, like tech startup or
and all those are important.
Yeah,
right? It's an ecosystem that supports each other.
Yeah.
One example that blows my mind is my son. I have twins that are going to college, but my son, even though he's going to school for computer engineering and he runs track, but he had a love for cooking. And in his last semester in high school, he would cook. He would buy, stuff on Saturday. Sunday night, he will cook his meal.
What would he cook?
Jollof rice.
Wow.
Jerk wings, honey jerk wings.
See the cuisine of both. That's
both cultures.
Wow,
and then
amazing.
Monday morning, he wakes up 4 a.m. Monday morning, plates all the meals, and before he even makes it to school, he's sold half the meals.
That's amazing.
And that shows the opportunity at such a young age that he gravitated towards, not just saying, hey, I want to get corporate America, but I want to do my own thing, and he's understanding the value of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you have any other entrepreneurial children, or is everyone kind of finding their own way in different fields?
Everyone's finding their own way. My oldest, she's actually in acting school at USC in LA.
That's amazing.
A minor in real estate management. Again, she's diversifying what she does. And, the traditional Nigerian thing, like, the professions that we have. I have that one who wants to be a doctor. Okay.
So that's so it's you hit the Nigerian parent mark, and then you hit the modern
open it up a bit.
Well.
Yes,
that's awesome. Yeah. As we start to wrap up, I'm curious, just your thoughts. Like a funny question I thought, like, how many years out do you think we are from getting an African diaspora person? Well, we have Kamala Harris.
Well, President Obama. President Obama's father was from Kenya.
Yeah.
So we have one.
Yeah.
And I think what's happening is more people are stepping up to the plate from the diaspora, whether you're from the Caribbeans or they're understanding that this country is their home.
Yeah.
And they have to be at the table to have the conversations. We have over 29 Nigerian Americans who are elected to office.
Over how many?
29.
29.
Nigerian Americans across the country.
Wow.
In Georgia alone, we're about 6 or 7.
Wow.
So along with myself, were 5 Nigerian Americans that were elected when I was elected at the state level. Unfortunately, one passed shortly after.
Right.
And then we have a young lady who's on city council for a new city that was formed.
Okay.
And then we have those on city council or school boards, So a lot of folks in the African diaspora are stepping up.
Yeah.
And they're understanding that this is home. A lot of us aren't going back. This is home.
Yeah.
And you have to make home the best place you can be.
That's it. That's definitely a key takeaway. Like realizing that this is home. If that's the step you want to take, right? Like this is home, and then I have to step up. Is there any similarity you see amongst these people? Like, is there certain backgrounds they share, or character traits, or like paths that you might be you might say might be indicative of like someone taking that step to go into elected office in future?
Well, when it comes to policy, the one that we have in common is we immigrated here.
Yeah.
Immigration is an issue. It's a huge issue in this upcoming election. And each party has a different perspective. I think the Democratic Party's perspective is a much better route, because it's addressing the challenges we've had with the backlog for those that have been here, or whether you came through DACA or marriage and so on and so forth. President Biden had the executive order to address those who got married. And then you have those who are coming through the border current today.
Yeah.
Is how do we address that? And that is a fault of the previous Trump administration, where they stopped processing people for a while. So there was a huge backlog of people at the border.
Yeah.
So when the border opened up, what do you expect? So we have to have a comprehensive immigration policy.
Yeah.
We also have to look at something that's common to is educational opportunities and healthcare, which is common to every one that resides in America.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, for us in the African diaspora, we're also Black.
Yes.
So Black issues do impact us every day. No one asked. I remember in college, I was asked a question when I was working. Someone mentioned a comment, "You don't act Black." And I couldn't understand why they mentioned that. But later on, I understood, where there's a certain stereotype behavior they expect because you're Black. And that's not the case.
Yeah. It's like, you are Black. So, you don't have to act Black.
So we have to address stereotypes or perspectives or myths of who Black people are, or how they're supposed to act, or how they're supposed to talk, or what they're supposed to eat. I think that's wrong. And those are issues that we have to deal with as Black people in America.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. I'd like to end on the note that you said earlier about how this is home. And for a lot of us, I don't know, I'm still in between, but for a lot of people, they're not gonna move back. And like taking that agency, I want to create the world that I want to see, and no one else is gonna do that work for me. It's been great having you here. Thank you so much for.
Thank you.
Any final thoughts?
Well, I appreciate you having this episode.
Absolute
I think
pleasure.
it's a good platform for us to learn. My advice to the listeners is you have to be a part of the movement. You have to be a part of this, because it's not just for today, but it's for tomorrow. It's for our kids. It's for our communities. It's for everyone that we interact with.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Representative Segun Adeyina. It's been such a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Wish you the best. Wish the party the best, even as we move closer and closer to the elections.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Once again, this is Zero Generation, the podcast for the dreamers who left home and are making a home abroad. You can catch us every 2 weeks on YouTube and all your podcast streaming platforms. And you can read my work, all the essays that I've written about these topics at damilolaonwah.com. Till next time, thank you for joining. Bye.